Welcome back. We are in the second half of this lecture, so hopefully you got a good stretch or rest or something in before you started this video. Okay, so Market for Lemons is an example where we're looking at used cars. So we're saying that used cars can be peaches, which are good cars, or lemons, which are bad cars. And we want to figure out for any given car, how much would you or someone else be willing to pay if they can't tell the difference between the peaches and the lemons. So what we're going to do is we're going to calculate an expected value based on the percentages of each type of car in the market. So in this example, we're going to say a peach is worth $15,000 to the owner and a lemon is worth $8,000. So it's not an unusable car, but it does have some problems. It may need more maintenance and it's just not as good quality. So we're going to say that there's a 25% chance that the car is a peach and a 75% chance that it is a lemon. And we want to figure out what is the most you should be willing to pay for a used car in this market. So we're going to use our expected value formula again. We're going to take that probability of peaches, which is 25%, so 0.25, times the value of a peach, which is 15,000, plus 0.75, so the probability of it being a lemon times the value of a lemon. And we get that the expected value in our market of a vehicle is 9,750. So this is the weighted average value of all cars in this market. So if you cannot tell the quality, so let's say this is a new car, you don't know if it's going to be good or bad. Everyone's going to just pay 9,750. A quarter of them are going to get good cars, the rest are going to get peaches. In the used car market, it gets a little bit different, and we'll talk about why. But as a buyer, if you cannot tell and you know that at least a quarter of the cars are good and three-quarters are bad or lemons, this 9,750 would be the maximum someone would be willing to pay in this market. So this causes some problems, right? On the buyer side and the seller side. So if you're a buyer, you're going to be overpaying for the bad cars. You'll be getting a good deal if there's a good car. But what if you have a peach? It's worth $15,000 to you. Are you going to be willing to sell your car for $9,750? Probably not, right? Now, there are some examples of why people still might have to sell their good cars at a lower price. But one of the things that's going to happen is the peaches are going to exit the market. Peaches are going to leave. They can't, if they're not able to sell it for what they value it, they're not going to sell it. So peaches start leaving the market. They're going to keep exiting until our market price reaches $8,000. Now, the more peaches there are in the market, this may not happen. The closer this expected value gets to the peach value, you may see people willing just to take a slightly lower amount. But in this case, because it's such a huge difference, there's mostly lemons in the market, all the peaches are going to exit. um, okay, so what would you like to do if you want to sell your peach? We need to figure out a way of credibly communicating this to your buyer. So you can provide a Carfax report, offer to have it checked out by a mechanic, provide maintenance reports and damage history. There's ways that you can do things to try to increase the probability that you are actually giving them a good car. Now, these things still don't guarantee it. There's a lot of things that this owner might know about the car that they're able to hide that won't show up in these places. For instance, I've had some issues with my car where like the brakes are sounding awful, it's making weird noise, something is broken. But as soon as I get it to the mechanic, like it stops doing that. And so they're like, we can't fix it, we don't know what's wrong. So mechanics don't always know everything. What if you want to buy a peach, you want to increase your chances? Go to CarMax or a reputable used car dealer, test drive it, take it to a mechanic, make sure you're getting it checked out, ask to see the maintenance history. If they can provide you with a warranty, if it's like at a dealership, great. If it's a individual buyer, that gets a little bit trickier. But all these things are trying to change the level of uncertainty because otherwise you're just going to have to assume that it's more likely than not to be a lemon. Okay. But there are things you can try to do to increase that probability. This type of market also applies to labor markets and anywhere where there may be asymmetric information. So, for instance, in the labor market, we talked about this a little bit last in the last video, but all job seekers describe themselves as peaches. They're going to say, "I'm a great worker. I show up on time. I love your company. I'm devoting my life to you and everything you're doing to make you as much profit because it gives me just extreme happiness to exist inside this building." Right? You're just gonna people will say crazy things. Really, you're there because they pay you, and if they quit paying you, you probably would quit being there, right? But the problem is you can pay somebody or even use like AI to write your resume for you. You can practice interview questions. You can have a really good personality. There's a bunch of stuff you can do to make yourself show up really well in the hiring process that honestly might have nothing to do with your actual quality as a worker. Practice interview questions. You can be great at interviewing. You can be personable. You can make stuff up. But when it comes down to actually doing the work, you might not be good at it, or showing up on time, or all sorts of other things. So sometimes we'll see jobs will ask for references, or there'll be a probation period where they're testing you and training you to figure out if you're, good. And that's because some of these things are really hard to determine before hiring you. Okay, so let's say you're an employer. How much are you going to offer job candidates as a starting salary? Well, let's say you cannot tell if you're hiring someone who's a peach or a lemon. And a peach is gonna be a good employee, and they would be worth $80,000. And a lemon employee, based on their productivity, would be worth 40,000. And so you don't wanna pay a lemon a peach salary, and you don't wanna pay a peach a lemon salary, but you really don't have a choice. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna create an expected value of salary. So 20% good workers times 80,000 plus 80% bad workers times 40,000, and you're going to come up with this $48,000 starting salary. And everybody who's hired is going to come in at that same wage, the good ones and the bad ones. The peaches eventually will get promoted, okay, and maybe eventually they're going to earn 80,000, right? They'll earn what they're worth. And the lemons, either they'll just be stuck at that 48,000 getting paid a little bit too much, maybe they'll be laid off or fired. So oftentimes when you after you graduate, you're going to be looking into entry level job market, and you're going to see the starting salary might seem very low. And it could just be because something like this, where there's actually more of the lower quality workers than higher quality workers, and employers don't know how to tell the difference. We'll also talk a little bit about efficiency wages and some other stuff, I think, next week. And some companies actually do the opposite. They'll say, "We want to attract all the peaches, so we're actually going to have a starting salary of $90,000. And we want to make sure that all of those top tier candidates are coming and working here. And that's fine. We're going to just pay way too much. We're going to pay a bunch of lemons 90,000. But then after the first year, at the end, we're gonna have a lot of rounds of layoffs, or they might call it attrition or something else. So they're gonna have high turnover. They're gonna only keep the good employees, and they're gonna fire all the people they figure out are lemons. So definitely keep this in mind when you're applying for jobs. And if you see something that's like paying 150,000 for starting salary, make sure that you are definitely one of those peach employees. Make sure you are good at what you're doing. You know what you're doing. You didn't just have, AI or ChatGPT do all of your degree for you. The more that you've cheated throughout college, the more likely you are to be a lemon than a peach. So, just keep that in mind. And not that you can't turn into a peach, you definitely can, but it's gonna take a couple years, and you're gonna lose out on a lot of income and promotions that otherwise would be there. So for those of you who are struggling through and doing your degree by yourself, you're not having AI do the whole thing for you. Just know that there will be potentially a payoff in the future when you are actually a good employee. So what do you want to do if you to prove that you're a peach? Well, going to college is a good step. Um, it's a very costly signal. It's really expensive to go to college, and typically if you're just gonna be a bad employee who's gonna be late all the time and get fired anyway, you don't wanna spend all that time and effort going to college. So, usually people will do that as a signal saying, yes, they can put in the hard work, they can put in the effort, they can do the work necessary. Having any type of work experience or internships is also helpful. Sometimes students come and talk to me and they're like, "I don't have an internship." I couldn't find one, or none of them paid anything. So I had this job. I'm working at the grocery store, some kind of retail work. Literally anything that you're doing is helpful. And honestly, if you've had some kind of job, especially for like a long time, maybe you worked at Target for 2 years or coffee shop or really anything, that longevity shows future employers that you have some of those skills necessary to be a good employee. Because if you kept your job for several years, you didn't get fired. So that means you probably showed up on time, you came to your shifts, you did the work at least the way that you were supposed to. It doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're a peach employee or like the absolute best employee, but having any kind of work experience honestly is super helpful. So if you aren't getting an internship, don't worry about it. I never had an internship because I needed money. I had to pay to support myself through college, so I always had to find jobs that paid me, and all of the internships were several months long. They conflicted with my school schedule. I wasn't able to work. I wasn't getting paid, so it just wasn't an option for me. So if you're in that same boat, um, any work experience you can get will be super helpful. Internships are also nice for you though, because you can see, oh, do I even like this type of job? Do I like this company? It can get you some connections possibly to firms that you may want to work for in the future. So don't just skip internships. They still are helpful. But if you aren't going the internship route, any type of work experience you have, volunteer experience is great. Oftentimes, though, you're gonna have to prove your worth after you get hired. So you're gonna have to take a job at a lower salary or at a lower position than maybe you think is worth it. If you're changing careers, if you're just entering the job market for the first time, you may have to start at that lower level and prove that you actually are very productive and a good employee to get promoted or moved into the position you really want. What can you do if you want to hire a peach? So let's say you're a company and you're like, how do we hire the good employees? We don't want to get stuck with the lemons because it takes like a year or more to figure out that they're terrible. Oftentimes, people will use personal referrals. So they'll say, hey, I'm hiring for this position. Does anyone know anyone? Be like, oh, yeah, my friend over here is looking for a job. My cousin, so and so, my student. Oh, this person was in my econ class before. They would absolutely be great. You should hire them. Personal referrals are nice because some of those hidden characteristics kind of go away. I'm not going to refer someone who I know is terrible because that's going to look bad on me later in the future. Jobs are moving more towards testing during the interview process. So if you're going to be a computer programmer, for instance, they're absolutely going to have you do some programming during the interview. They'll be asking you programming questions. I worked as a budget analyst for a government agency for a while before teaching. And during my interview, they gave me this report and they're like, hey, you need to write a memo about this to the director. And they gave me it was for a budget analyst. I think I might have said that. They gave me some financial sheets and they're like, hey, you need to explain this stuff to whoever, and I don't remember who it was, but I had to take all this information and I had to prove that I could actually do some stuff and know some things. And some of it was things that I had never seen before, but I was able to use my critical thinking skills and my actual other knowledge and experience to do well on that test, and I was hired. So you are going to have to know things to get hired for a lot of positions, especially some of the higher paid jobs. And then I think I mentioned this before, there's a probationary period, so it can be a couple weeks, a couple months, a year. I've seen a probationary period that lasts up to 4 years in like some of the medical settings. And this is where they're basically saying, we're just testing you out. And if at any point during this period you know, we find out that you're really not what we thought you were, we can end this employment agreement without any issues. So sometimes if you have a job contract, it's really hard to fire people if you work for a union or other things. But with probationary period, if you meet certain requirements during that time, they can just immediately end your employment. And so this goes into the credibility problem, which we talked about already. It looks like my video is not working. Well, I will find a link to that and post it somewhere later in Canvas as a fun surprise. Okay. So part of the problem with credibility is that we have to trust other people and our interests do not always align. So just like when you're selling your house, the real estate agent wants to sell it faster than you would, And even though you both make more money, our interests don't align. So when the real estate agent tells me like, "Yes, you should take this offer. This is the highest offer you're ever going to get." I really have to think like, is that true? Should I wait another week? Am I going to miss out on this high offer or should I wait for something better? Costly signaling makes things more credible. So going to college makes it more likely that you're going to be a high quality employee. But until they fix, some of these AI issues, there are going to be people getting degrees who don't know anything, who are able to, get through all of college without doing anything. And I mean, that kind of happened before. But the more people that go to college, the less credible of a signal it is. Well, we'll talk about that more in our labor market chapter. So you may pay a premium to ensure quality through education, advertising, brand names, long term contracts, things that sort of change those incentives. Often these things have a really large sunk cost. So you spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on your degree or on advertising or developing your brand name. You don't want to lie to your customers or your employer because you'll lose your job. You won't make any sales, and then that's just lost money. So costly signaling doesn't guarantee quality, it just makes it more likely to be credible. So if you have a lawyer who's wearing an expensive suit and he has a nice car, maybe he's paying for a Super Bowl ad, he's probably a good lawyer, or at least a lawyer that wins a lot of cases. We're assuming that he's made this money so he can buy all of this expensive stuff. But he could just be going into debt. He could have had investors, who are investing in him. Maybe he bought all the expensive car or he leased it. He borrowed a suit to make himself look credible. Um, and maybe he's terrible and he's not going to be able to afford all that stuff. Okay, so you really want to think about, what does this signal mean? Does it mean what I think it means? Do our incentives, are they aligned? Are interests aligned? When you're hiring people, when you're working for people, all that kind of stuff. And we assume that firms are wealth maximizing, meaning they don't place any direct value on honesty. So companies are only going to be honest if it's going to somehow help them make money. So they're really just relying on the threat of termination of that business relationship. If I lie to my customers, they're not going to shop with me anymore and I'm not going to make any money. But I mean, I don't know about you, but I have definitely seen lots of products and lots of things that did not work the way that they promised. And they still seem to be in business. So either maybe it just didn't work for me or people haven't figured out that it didn't work or I don't know. Right. But companies are just going to lie a little bit or, as much as they can, but they want to get as many sales without losing that credibility. And then companies either deliver the quality they promised or they're going to supply something worse. Okay, so the problem is they're just trying to make money. If you're going to buy their bad stuff and everyone's going to keep buying it, then they're going to keep producing it. We have some enforcement mechanisms in our markets. So, first is that warranties can be used. This is where the company guarantees that they will replace or repair a defective product. So, the company says, hey, we're not trying to give you a bad product on purpose, but we know that it happens sometimes. So, if you do get a lemon, we will replace it or we will repair it. The easier it is for consumers to communicate with each other and to share information, the more likely a company is going to have to be honest. There is a store that's no longer in business where my parents bought a washer and dryer, and it was a lemon. It was terrible, and the company did not replace it. They their warranty said they could repair it, so they just kept sending someone out to keep repairing it every couple weeks, even though it was they should have just replaced it because it was terrible. My parents told everybody, every single person they knew, this company is awful. They gave us a sad machine. They're not fixing it. We spent all this money on a washer, dryer, and we just can't, we can't clean our clothes. And that company went out of business, which is not surprising. I'm sure lots of people had that same problem. So the idea is that if a firm cheats, even just one individual, all of the consumers in the market are able to learn this, and it's going to cause future sales to be lost by that company. Okay, so what's the outcome? Well, it depends. Really, we really want to look at that future revenue or total income stream. And so we see some companies rely on very short term sales, maybe something that are trendy like beanie babies, Labubu, whatever's going on these days. And they really just want to make as many sales as possible now. They just want to make as many possible now and then get that cash and then get out of the market. And if this is the case, right, if it's going to be a while before people discover that it's a bad product, they're just going to sell as much as possible, then they're going to get out and maybe have, there's no way for customers to get their money back. So for some things like this, they might actually have more of an incentive to buy. Whereas if you're looking at a company that needs to be around for a long time, they want you to be not just a now customer, they also want you to be a future customer. Then they need to deliver an honest product, or at least whatever you think you're buying. So if I buy Oreos, they don't want me to just buy Oreos today. They want me to buy them next week and the week after and next year and on a regular basis for the rest of my life. Whereas somebody's selling something trendy, they're selling an online course, fitness program, something like that. Maybe I might just buy it one time and that's all the money they're ever going to make from me. So, really, whether or not companies are honest is determined by how it's going to impact their profit, how it's going to impact their future sales. And so, cheating is only going to be prevented if they're going to be earning future income from customers and they're going to lose that income. So, basically, companies are going to be honest if they have to make money in the future. And so, what this means in Econ jargon is that the present discounted value of this rental stream must be greater than the one time wealth increase from cheating. Okay, so rental stream, it doesn't necessarily mean you're renting. This could be me, I'm buying Oreos today and next month and the month after. So, it's an income stream. It's going to be happening over and over again. It's greater than the one time increase from cheating. So if they lie to me and my Oreos have, I don't know, teeth in them or something gross, I'm never going to buy Oreos again. Maybe they made a bunch of money from me right now, but they're losing all that future money from the 200 packages of Oreos I was going to buy over my lifetime. So we have some enforcement mechanisms. Sometimes they fix the problem, sometimes they don't. So when we're purchasing stuff, we really want to think about, who am I buying this from? Is there a way to remedy the problem if I am lied to? If you're buying something from a name brand at a retail store, typically it's going to be you're going to get what you think you're getting. And if not, it's easy to get a refund. If you're buying something out of somebody's like trunk in a parking lot, you're never going to see them again. There's a much higher chance that you're going to be getting a lemon, getting something that you didn't expect. And then the last thing that we want to look at real quick in this chapter is called statistical discrimination. This has to do with asymmetric information because some parties know more about their own driving or their own activities than others. But statistical discrimination is a legal type of discrimination, and it is based on characteristics of a group to which somebody belongs. It is the result of observable differences in group characteristics. So, look at some examples in a second. If we notice that, let's say we're looking at people who smoke cigarettes, smokers versus non smokers. This includes vaping and other types of nicotine. People who smoke have much higher odds of getting lung cancer. Okay. So in this case, the health insurance says, oh, if you smoke, we're going to charge you a higher price for health insurance. Do all smokers get lung cancer? No, they don't. But because there's a higher probability, legally, insurance companies are allowed to charge you more. Typically, statistical discrimination legally only happens with insurance, where you're trying to gauge some kind of risk or how much is this person likely to cost me. If you have a higher risk or a higher chance of being paid by the insurance company, they're going to typically charge you a higher insurance premium. So, for example, males under the age of 25 typically pay the highest car insurance rates. When you look at number of accidents and risky behavior, men under 25 tend to take more risky behavior. And so, in a lot of places around the country, you're going to pay more money if you are male and if you are under 25. Now, some years ago, California decided to change this and say we're not going to do that anymore. So let's say previously, we have two people, a male and a female. Let's say they're both 22 years old. And let's say the male was going to pay $250 a month for car insurance, and the female was going to pay $150 a month. Now, neither of them have been in any accidents yet. And so the insurance company is just trying to guess how risky they likely are to be. Well, California said you can't do this anymore. No more discrimination by gender. So what happened? Well, maybe the male insurance rate went down to 200 and the female insurance rate went up to 200. So the insurance company is still going to collect the same amount of money. They just now have to spread it out over more people. So if you're in a riskier category, in a lot of cases you might pay more, but depending on how the laws are set up, you might actually pay more if you are a safer driver. Health insurance costs go up as you get older. So the older you are, the more likely are you to have health problems and expensive health problems. And so you're going to see insurance premiums go up as you get older. FICO score, this is determining if you are a credit risk. I mean, there's a lot of problems with the FICO score. We don't have time to get into that today. But it looks at things like your credit history. Have you missed payments? Do you have defaults? Are you bankruptcy? Do you have a long credit history? How much credit do you have available? It looks at all these things. And if you have a higher FICO score, it's supposed to mean that you're less of a credit risk. Oftentimes, you will get lower interest rates on loans. You may have access to certain things with a high FICO score that you might not otherwise have. Sometimes, if you're trying to rent an apartment, they look at your credit score, and if it's too low, they say, sorry, we're not going to rent to you because we're worried you're not going to actually pay your rent every month. And so legally, places are allowed to discriminate, at least when it comes to things related to credit based on your FICO score. You're more likely to get a job if you have a college degree than if you don't. That is another form of statistical discrimination. There are reasons for that. If you have a college degree, you learned some skills, you learned some math and communication, critical thinking, problem solving. But typically, people who have the ability to go to college are going to go to college. Um, but like for me, for instance, I have my certain level of intelligence and capabilities, and I absolutely did learn a lot in college. But if I had just skipped college and gotten a job and done something, I would still be highly productive right now. And so I don't know. Companies use this information to make judgments about us, about people, because they don't have a lot of information. They're trying to guess. They're like, well, if you were high quality, maybe you would go to college or have gone to some college or some certificates. But it's not always true. Sometimes life gets in the way. Maybe you had a kid or a family member you had to take care of. You had a lot of work you had to do, and there are just things that sort of got in the way. Now, you are all here taking this college class, so that's great. It will improve your uh, uh, what am I trying to say? It will improve your ability to be employed in the future. But statistical discrimination is legal, especially in insurance and things related to credit. And this is because of asymmetric information. So if you're going to be a bad driver, you're not going to tell anyone. Your super risky behavior, like I love jumping off of buildings, you're not going to tell your health insurance or car insurance agency this information because it's going to let them know that you're more risky and they will charge you more. All right, so let's end there. Unfortunately, this is an intro class. We don't get to get into all of the details. But if any of these things were interesting to you, definitely do a little bit more deep dive on your own during winter, summer break. And there's a whole lot more to learn. All right, have a great week. Go into Canvas, look at all those pages, do all the assignments, and I'll see you next week.